The other day we were followed briefly on our Instagram by Hall & Oates.
Oh my gosh.
For a few hours.
It's almost better that they're gone now. They came and they left. It
was,
really is.
It was like a one-night stand with with two old men. But it did dredge up some memories for me that were difficult. So back in 2005, they played at Innsbruck After Hours here.
That's right.
In the Richmond, Virginia area. And I like some Hall & Oates.
Yeah.
And if you play at Innsbruck After Hours, that means that your part of your career is you play the songs that everybody knows.
You play the hits.
That's part of the social contract to come there, which is a good thing. I'm not, we're all in some point of our lives where we're at the greatest hits.
Yep.
Except they didn't play two of them.
Oh.
They did not play Kisses on My List and Private Eyes.
Wow.
And you know what? Two Hall & Oates songs should be like bound into the set list, like carved in stone or like molted.
I would agree. And they probably played Maneater, didn't they? No.
I think they did. I think they opened with it. But anyway.
Because they are a band that has some songs I really like, and then they have some songs that are, quite frankly, not good.
They have a lot of songs I like. When you play a venue like that, you should not be allowed to say these phrases. This is a song from our new album. No. If we wanted to hear a song from your new album, you wouldn't be here. And I love Hall & Oates, but they did not play Kisses on My List and Private Eyes, and that's always been a bit of a sore spot for me.
I remember that. So who did you go with, or did you go solo? I don't know. I just know I wasn't there. I just want to know that you went solo to a Hall & Oates.
No, I didn't. Who did I go with? Are you sure you weren't there?
I'm not sure. I don't think I was.
I don't think you were. No, I didn't go to that by myself.
Well, either way, we'll believe that you didn't go by yourself. Although, again, the image of you by yourself with waiting for...
Tears streaming down my face when I realized Private Eye is not going to happen. Hall & Oates are still awesome. I could see how it's very difficult to do something over and over and over again. And for whatever reason, they felt like that didn't need to be on there. It was a mistake on their part because they should have played those songs no matter what.
That's right.
I forgive them, and I'm glad that what they've contributed to the world, they're still pretty awesome.
They probably followed us and then somehow remembered you screaming.
There's that guy that was all by himself.
I don't think there's any pictures. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's him. Well, I want to make clear, they followed us. Like we didn't follow them first.
I've been burned before. I learned the whole you wait a little bit before you follow back. It's kind of like you don't send that message right after the date.
That may have been what burned us though. Although the story is so much better that they just came and went a thief in the night. All right, well, welcome to Origin of SPEAKcies. This is Scott. I'm here with my good friend Steve, and we have got a great show today talking about carnies and bandwagons and circus, P.T. Barnum, all that good stuff. And then we finish it off with some wrestling, which I don't know a whole lot about, but...
And to be clear, we're going to talk about wrestling. It's not going to be us grappling under...
Yeah. The plan is talking about wrestling, not actually wrestling.
Yeah.
Which...
Well, let's see. Let's see how it goes. Maybe...
I brought some baby oil. Blech, I can't say baby oil. Somebody pointed that out with...
How often are you saying baby oil that people are pointing out you can't say it?
When we released... One of the first episodes, where you're talking about when you're talking about doing your pose down for and I said something like a little baby oil goes a long way, and I got a text from someone saying, you say oil like my mom. I was like, wow.
Yeah. How often is her mom saying oil?
Oil. So I do have some baby oil on hand. Ooh, I said it right that time.
There you go.
And we'll see where it goes, but we're going to start with jumping on the bandwagon.
Jumping on the bandwagon. So this is a term I hear a lot. I think I use it a lot, and most of the time it involves sports. When you find somebody who is really on some sort of trendy team.
Yeah.
For example, we're down in Virginia, and I had this discussion with my kid that half her classmates have on New England Patriots jerseys.
Right.
I'm fairly certain that they don't have any real connection to the Northeast. And my daughter's like, Daddy, why do you say that? I was like, well, that Indian kid in the corner, I'm pretty sure, his dad didn't grow up in the mean streets of Boston.
Yeah, that's not a Boston accent you're hearing.
Yeah.
But, hey, that's the great thing about America. You can choose any team, but you're going to be called a
front runner or jumping on the bandwagon.
Yep. And then closely related phrase, which is a fair weather fan.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to be called that. I mean, I've been ride or die with the Dolphins, mostly pretty much all die. Yeah. This is what I do. I pick a sports team where I have lived, because I moved around a lot. Right. So I lived, but I pick a team that like just had their golden age.
Yeah.
And then it's right after that I decide I'm a fan. So that happened with me with the Dolphins. Also the Cincinnati Reds, but at least I got one championship. It was a long time ago.
Right. You can buy low. I think that's one of those things too. If you don't want to look like the person,
it pays off more. I've always thought that. Like now it may never pay off, but if my team, everyone knows who my team is. Now, if I jump on the bandwagon, how much can you really cheer as a Patriots fan who just randomly picked them because they won a lot of Super Bowls?
Right. Now you've stuck with your teams. Have you ever had to convert?
I've been tried to talk into converting by you. Do you remember the Redskins thing?
I did, and I was buying low. Now, but I had the zeal of a new convert, because years ago, I for years was a Minnesota Vikings fan.
Right.
For reasons I'm really not sure why. But again, I bought low and I committed to that.
Well, I will give you this credit, because I was going to bring up the Vikings and kind of say, you kind of jumped up, but no, you didn't jump on a bandwagon because they weren't good.
That good. Yeah. And then when they signed Brett Favre, I decided that was a bridge too far, and I had to convert to the Redskins. Jumping on the bandwagon.
So what is a bandwagon? Well, a bandwagon, just a wagon, but it...
Can I jump in?
Please.
Was there a band on the wagon?
So probably, yeah, a band. Yeah, there's a band, a bunch of carnies, and a bearded lady, and a bunch of circus people.
So Bandwagon came back from when circuses would come into town, and that's the way they announced their arrival, was literally having a bandwagon, playing music, driving down the middle of the road.
Free advertising. Yeah. And quite frankly, what other advertising are you going to do that's even today that's as good as some carnies in a big wagon coming through town? I guess Facebook.
And they had to, and we'll talk about some other things. Is one of the things you did. You went territory to territory, and you had to kind of announce yourself.
Yep.
And that's you might put something in the newspaper, but you're not updating your Instagram page or running an ad on TV. You got to show up and make a pretty big announcement.
That's right. So you pop into town in a wagon. You get everybody's attention. They'd come through town, and it reminds me of, I would love to joke and call this a classic, but it's not, which is Big Top Pee-wee.
Yeah.
I
unfortunately have to agree with you. That's not a classic.
It hurts because Pee-wee's Big Adventure is so good. And my kids love the Pee-wee movies, and they actually like Big Top Pee-wee, because when you're a kid, you don't really realize how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's awful.
I remember that's when Pee-wee goes all the way. And that was uncomfortable for me.
Very uncomfortable. Yeah. And so many things we could debunk about that movie, which, first of all, right off the bat, when everybody in town hates Pee-wee for like no reason. They don't really have a reason why. They just, and even my kid was like, why is everybody so mean to Pee-wee? It's like, I don't know. They don't explain it. Right. And then the next thing that happens is, to tie back to Bandwagon, the circus comes to town, and of course, when they show up, they make themselves known, because that's the it's free advertising. So you show up in a wagon.
Yeah, you're driving through town with a band playing.
Anyway, so Big Top Pee-wee, you get a sense of this actually. Don't go watch it, but trust me, them coming into town with a bunch of the carnival folk, which I keep saying carny, and now I kind of feel like it's a little bit of a slur. They don't. Do you know what they like to be called instead?
No, please share.
Talkers. Oh, no, showmen. Showmen. So talkers are the ones that are outside. So this whole carnival barker term is not even a real inside carny term. So the talker is the one that gets people in the doors or to the show. The showman, and they said, I did some reading on quote carnies, and they're very hostile to that term. They say, hey, we're not carnies. Carnies are, you go into town, you show up, and you get any local kids that can't get a job at the TGI Fridays because they got, they're on strike 3. they go to the carnival. That's a carny, and they're selling, popcorn and peanuts and candied apples. The ones that really are the lifers that go from town to town, like you talked about before, those they call themselves showmen. Mm-hmm. So I think that's fair. So whether they be carnies or showmen, they show up on the bandwagon and they realize that, hey man, this is really good marketing. They started literally selling seats on the bandwagon. Okay. So they would come into town. Ooh, this is cool. Kids, adults, whomever would look at it and go, I want to be part of this. And they'd say, sure, for a quarter or whatever, you can get a seat on the bandwagon.
So kind of like when you take a team, you're not picking that team for the right reasons.
Exactly.
In this case, you paid for it. There's not that special bond or pain that you need to go through for whatever you're decided sports
you see
team
something
is.
shiny, you see something that looks cool, it's the new thing, and I want to just jump on it. So it was actually a literal thing for a while.
So when did this start getting outside of circus vernacular and kind of get out into the general parlance of talk?
Right. So the first time that bandwagon, the term itself, even shows up is P.T. Barnum references the term in his autobiography, The Life of P.T. Barnum, written by himself, which is actually what it's literally called. Nice. And that was in 1855. It didn't become used in politics until the late 1800s. Politicians started realizing, hey, there's something to this, and they would literally use bandwagons. So there was this amazing gentleman by the name of Dan Rice, and I was very impressed that this guy kept popping up because it feels like he should just be a footnote to the story. But then I saw this picture. Let me share this with you. This is Dan Rice, who was known as the King of American Clowns.
The King of Clowns. That is horrifying in a very, very subtle way. So it looks like Abraham Lincoln dressed up like a court jester.
So apparently Dan Rice actually was the enterprising clown who rented out his bandwagon to politicians. And so then the next step that happened is it started getting used in rhetoric, politicians saying it as a negative thing. Don't jump on my opponent's bandwagon.
Right. Calling people out for following somebody for the wrong reasons.
Right. So, I mean, while at one point people did literally jump on a bandwagon, then bandwagons got used. I know I keep saying literally, but I feel like in this context...
But it literally is being used, yeah.
It's like literally being used. So,
and I have a feeling Dan Rice was in some of those wagons doing things that we don't want to know about.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, not to be confused with falling off the wagon, which after, again, reading about carnies, unfortunately, I do feel like there's a lot of falling off the wagon, looking at Dan Rice, that could have been a thing with him too. I just want to kind of leave it with this. By the way, just to sort of close the loop on the term, Teddy Roosevelt wrote a book sometime around 1899. It was published in 1951 called Letters. In it, he references jumping on the bandwagon as something that would happen in political contests. So, but before we move on, I just want to say I was going to find some really cool like carny banter or carny terminology. It's overwhelming. For those of you, if anybody's listening and wants to know more, and you do want to know more, trust me, this is something that I spent a lot of time reading up on because it's fascinating. There's a website called www, and I will put that in there because it looks like a GeoCities website.
Mm-hmm. So you know it's good.
So you know it's good. You might need the www.goodmagic.com. And it has an extensive listing of, hundreds of terms used in the carnival. Mm-hmm. And a lot of really interesting stories. It's really almost too much to even get into here, but we'll see how. I
think there's always time for hot carny talk, which is, I think, if Dan Rice had a radio show or a podcast, that's what it would be. That man had a very adventurous sex life. There's just no way looking at that outfit that there's been things that he's seen and done that no one needs to know.
Can you imagine being the America's Top Clown or whatever it was called, and oh my gosh, and just looking at that picture. So I do want to mention, you mentioned podcast. There is a podcast called Ballyhoo. Mm-hmm. I was going to talk a little bit about this term ballyhoo or bally. So I guess I've heard the term ballyhoo.
Right.
it is what is referred to when the, quote, talker, I think I mentioned the talker earlier, goes out and tries to get people to come in and see the show.
Right.
So they've got a CD they sell with classic Ballyhoos, and it's really cool. So you listen to these people try to get, customers to come in, and what they'll do too, they get really ornate. Like they'll bring performers to the Ballyhoo. So you might just get a peek of the Lizard Man or whatever, and oh my gosh, now I want to see what's going on at this show. You just get a taste of it.
Look through the doorway. They're looking at the mule-faced girl. You're going to look down in your city, and you may never have the chance to see it again. Alive. The deadly piranhas. $10,000 reward. If not, absolutely alive.
Our girls are going to show you just a little of what they do in the big show inside. Everybody say hello to Misty Morn. She's hotter than the 4th of July. She's got all the things you like a girl to have, and she knows what to do with them. Show 'em, Misty.
So these guys are really professionals. The term itself, Ballyhoo, nobody's really quite sure where it came from, but there are some interesting theories. One of them, and of course, there's the stock. Well, we think it's probably nautical term because ballot may come from ballast, but it's not. I don't think. So the one I liked the best was that Ballyhoo came into general usage in 1893. So right around the same time, Columbian Exposition in Chicago, there was a, quote, Streets of Cairo pavilion. So performers from the Middle East that only spoke Arabic were the ones performing, obviously. And the manager would call them whenever it was time to perform because if you've ever seen Baskets the Clown, and you remember he joined up with the carnival, you remember his carny name?
Yeah. Was it Noodles?
Noodles, which is great. And you remember why it was Noodles because that's what he brought to the, everybody's like, hey, what do you got to, again, if you haven't seen Baskets, I'm sorry, but it's just funny. The origin story of Noodles' name, which this is Zach Galifianakis plays Baskets the Clown. And he runs away from home kind of, he's a grown man. It's a long story, but he falls in with like this traveling group of street performers. And they're like, well, what do you have to bring to the table? You got to have something for us to take you on as part of the group. And the only thing he has is like this can of beefaroni or spaghetti and meatballs, the cheap kind. And so they're like, you got your Noodles. And all of a sudden he's Noodles the Clown. So if you know about Noodles, you know that there's no real, or if you know about street performers, there's no real schedule. They just kind of call you when it's time to go. And so he'd call these dancers, which by the way, they're balletti dancers. They're from balletti, which is a term that later got like bastardized into belly dancers. So he'd call them and they would mumble under their breath and say, Da'ala. Oh gosh, I know I was going to get strong. Da'alahoon. So which means, oh, for God's sake. And so he heard that and he began referring to it as Ballyhoo because that's what he heard. Now, I will admit this could very well, I think the chances of this being true are maybe like 10%, but it's my favorite that I found. So Ballyhoo, there are so many other terms within Ballyhoo. There's something called freezing the tip.
It sounds like a Dan Rice move.
Yeah, exactly. There's the pitch, turning the tip, and the jam. These are all part of the Ballyhoo. So, again, I can't stress enough how much you should go to goodmagic.com or check out the Ballyhoo podcast and learn more about this because, honestly, we're joking around. They take it very seriously, and it's in many people's career.
Yeah, this is their livelihood.
That ties into, what you want to talk about next, Steve. All right, so
we're talking about a lot of carny terms, circus terms, and one of the ones that I like that actually a term I enjoy or I find very interesting has its roots in the circus and the carnival, and the term is kayfabe. Kayfabe. So the roots of kayfabe come back from carnivals, and it's basically carny slang for protecting the secrets of the business.
Got it.
Your carnival comes in town. Frankly, they have some rigged games. They have some other stuff going on, but you in the town don't need to know the behind the scenes truth of what's happening. Mm-hmm. So another thing that came out of carnivals was actually professional wrestling. The roots of professional wrestling come back to circuses and carnivals.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
So, and this gets into my I love finding about subcultures and just the little intricacies of everything.
Right.
One of the reasons, hopefully, is why I know so much about juggalos, who also,
by
the way, also have a wrestling federation, but that's another story. So
that's very interesting, though. I do want to know more about that at some point.
Sometime that'll be our other after Hot Steam Engine talk and Hot Dan Rice.
Sponsored by Fago, if I recall.
Fago, I believe that's correct. So with carnivals, you would have they would have strongmen. You would have a guy, in the kind of, you can picture the outfit with the mustache and he's got the onesie with the one strap and things like that.
Those guys never look ripped or anything. They're just like big.
But they were probably legit tough.
Well, because they've got that country strong or that depression strong or whatever it is. I guess it's pre-depression, but it's like they're just big men.
Yeah.
That do things. Big. They're not like working on their pecs or their deltoids. So
one of the things they would have is they would have the strongman would be there, and they would, as they went town to town, they would have a challenge that you could bring someone out of the audience to come out and, wrestle. They call it, I think, catch wrestling. You would lock up and things would happen. So with that, so they wanted to make sure that they won. No one wanted to bring their champion into town to have local boy come out there and take him out. So a couple ways they made sure that would happen. One of them was the strongman would have a finishing move, or a hook is what it was called. So basically you could wrestle and do some things, but the guy had a move similar to what I guess you'd see in maybe UFC now, but also in wrestling when someone has a finishing move. They had a move they were going to do on you that you weren't going to win. Okay. You were going to get your arm snapped or your leg snapped.
So, but it's not cheating, but it's like, this is my special move.
Right.
That I'm not literally bringing out a blade or a hook.
Right.
It's a technique.
It's a technique. You were going to win one way or the other. So as circuses and carnivals traveled from territory to territory, and each circus had a territory, that kind of was the genesis for wrestling. So you would have different regions of the country would have a territory, and they weren't very happy with other people coming into their territory. So people kind of would mind their region.
Yeah.
And as they grouped together, a lot of the promotions, everyone had a world champion, and they realized this wasn't a really good way to do that. So they would start to band together. One of the first big ones was the National Wrestling Alliance, or NWA.
Heard of that somewhere.
Yeah, so most people nowadays, they hear NWA, they think of the rap group. I believe it was Nubians with Attitudes. I'm 99% certain that's what it stood for.
Yep.
So we'll talk later about the National Wrestling Alliance, or the NWA.
Yep.
So what would happen is the territories would band together, and they would nominate somebody to be the world champion. And what that person would do is they would tour region to region, and they'd fight the local good guy. So in wrestling parlance, the good guy is the baby face or the face.
Yeah.
And in the bad guy would be called the heel. So going back to the term kayfabe, you're protecting the secrets of the business. So as we know now, professional wrestling is scripted, predetermined outcomes.
Yeah.
But you didn't necessarily promote that. And also, too, if you were a face or a heel, you didn't want people to know that you didn't, in real life, you were probably friends behind the scenes, but you kind of had to keep your performance going off stage.
Absolutely. It takes the fun out of it.
Yeah. So great links were made to make sure that people didn't reveal the true nature of that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I hate in sports now is I want to, there's a little bit of that, or there used to be in other professional sports where it was like, or maybe they really did hate each other.
Right.
Teams hated each other, basketball and baseball teams. Now they're all palling around.
Yeah. And that still bothers me. Like when a heated game is over and then they all shake hands or pray and they're real nice to each other. Yeah. Maybe it's because when I was younger, I watched professional wrestling, and I expect them to kind of keep that going. Yeah, kayfabe. They need to keep it going. So kayfabe again refers to keeping the secrets, keeping the performance going afterwards. So again, I love the idea of subcultures and how things work. So for years, wrestling was divided up into territories, and you pretty much didn't go into each other's territory. And this enabled a couple things. If you had your region, you were in control. If you were a wrestler, you could kind of do your shtick or your act and go area to area and do the same storyline or performance over again. And sometimes you'd see people that would team up against each other, and they would kind of have a feud in one area, and the show works, so they'd go somewhere else and do that.
Yeah, and you didn't have to worry about getting it spoiled,
right?
Because
no one knew.
Yeah, but so this was sort of established. I think what I'm hearing is the carnival and performers having a territory.
Right.
It started there, and then the wrestling. I think you thought it catch wrestling, right?
Yeah.
Was started in the carnivals,
right?
And then this was sort of just a natural extension of that.
It grew out and continued to do that.
Yeah.
So having the territories in the regions worked for a while till the 80s, when cable television allowed people to see things nationally, and also too you could see that you might recognize the act you saw in one area was then showing up somewhere else.
Yeah. All of a sudden you start. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me. You tell me if I'm off base here, but I always like to bring it back to Three Amigos when I can.
Sure.
So, do you remember when the German who has idolized Little Ned, meets him and he's like, and I won't try to do a German accent.
Yeah,
you can try if you want to, but and he goes, and then I learned about trick photography, and he's furious because he believes that he's been lied to, and Ned is not as fast as he has been portrayed, but and then he learns otherwise. But same idea. It's like all of a sudden the facade starts to crack.
It is, and so as that gets out there too, the idea of keeping kayfabe starts to fade. As time went on, the territories coalesced into two. The National Wrestling Alliance evolved into World Championship Wrestling, owned by Ted Turner. And then a Northeast Federation that originally was the WWWF became the WWF.
Much more catchy.
That's right. And now is the WWE. They were the last two until the WWE pretty much was the king with a couple other small federations.
Yeah, I will say as a non-wrestling fan growing up, because I wasn't allowed to.
Right.
Not that I'm, trust me, any better than anybody, because I would have loved this stuff. WWE, when it became WWE, even I was like, ugh. WWF was WWF. Yeah.
It flowed.
It had a great brand. It sounded good, and it was like, it conjured up the images of all your favorite, Roddy Piper, and then it was WWE.
So you know why it became WWE?
No, because it's terrible.
Thank your vegan friends at the World Wildlife Fund, who successfully lobbied to have that that change. So thanks again, hippies, for everything.
Yeah, bleep the World Wildlife Fund.
So as things coalesced, and also internet, it becomes a little bit more obvious. You can have the behind the scenes. So people now, instead of having to drive in separate cars to maintain that they were enemies, the behind the scenes is pretty much kayfabe doesn't, I think, exist pretty much anymore. But also
it's still real to me.
And there are many people that is true to. However, something that does still exist is the National Wrestling Alliance. So in the year
Nubians with an attitude.
That's right. Yeah. So in the year 2017, someone acquired the name National Wrestling Alliance and all the championships associated with that. A gentleman by the name of Billy Corrigan. You might know him better as the lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins.
Whoa! Why?
He apparently is
he has too much money. He doesn't know what to do with it.
He's a longtime wrestling fan, and
has he like showed up on? He probably has.
I think he's shown up at a couple.
Yeah.
Things.
But like as a character, I wouldn't be surprised.
Not as a character. No, I think he was
like Trump or random people that'll show up.
Well, Donald Trump is actually a WWE Hall of Famer.
Oh, I did not know that.
So
I just knew
one of
that
his many qualifications for president.
So he's our first WWE Hall of Famer president.
Yeah, and I like it.
Hopefully not the last.
Probably not the last, based on how things are going. I have a feeling he's not the last.
Well, there was some Rock talk, right?
Yeah, and he would be the second.
The people's eyebrow in the Oval Office. Well, why not?
Why not? So as the WWE is kind of the dominant force, there's been several smaller minor league federations that are out there. But Billy Corgan has brought back the name of the NWA, has brought back the idea of kind of the roving champion going all around the country to wrestle people. And if you want to go on a YouTube time travel, there's a web series sponsored by the NWA called 10 Pounds of Gold, which if you just want to, again, I know it's very difficult to go on YouTube and spend some time.
Yes, very.
Disappearing, but yeah. I highly advise that. So
it's 10 Pounds of Gold. Okay.
Yeah. So when you were a kid, did you ever get into wrestling or watching?
No, I was not allowed to, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it was too homoerotic because I don't think it was the violence.
It is pretty much. I mean, there's no way around that. But my parents begrudgingly let my brother and I watch it.
Well, I seem to recall at least one photo of your dad with the Ultimate Warrior, or did I make that up?
No, that was when he was with a television channel. And would go to national conferences, and it was Sting. It wasn't the Ultimate Warrior.
Okay. So the other guy with face paint.
Let's get that straight. Don't make me have to.
Yeah. Well, so I wasn't allowed to. I was always a little bitter about it. My cousins were really into it. Mm-hmm. But see, I was that cousin because here's two things I did. One was my parents were had this ethic of they're not going to like lie to me, right? So even like Santa Claus, I was told from the get, like there's no Santa Claus. And then I got into big trouble because I told my other cousin in Kentucky, who was older than me, that there was not a Santa Claus. And I'm like, how am I possibly in trouble for this? But I was, and I didn't understand why. But the other is this wrestling thing, and my cousins came back. They had actually gone to, I don't know if it was WrestleMania or whatever. They went and saw it, and they came back and they were like, "It's not real. We saw they were like working together." I was like, "Yeah," and I think that was the main reason my parents didn't want me to get into it. Was not the homoeroticism. It was the they didn't want me to be into something that was
not true,
fake.
Yeah,
but again, that anyway. Now I want to know: did you have a experience where you found out stuff wasn't fake, or like did you always know it wasn't real?
I'm pretty sure I always knew it wasn't real, and my father would constantly remind my brother and I, you just do a pulse check. You two do know this is fake, and we say yes, Dad, but because there would always be something. We knew it was scripted, but there would always be some sort of unbelievable thing that we're like, well, if he did that had to have happened. And I think the thing that always appealed to me, again, I think it's like a great American performance art. Yep. When you can see a bad guy or a heel do his thing and incite a crowd to hate him. If you get a chance, also YouTube time traveling. Andy Kaufman had a time in the 80s where he would he went to a small region in Memphis, and part of his comedy act was he would wrestle women. Right. And in the same way that the carnival performers, circus performers, have someone coming out of the crowd, he would have a woman come out. He would, and he called himself the intergender champion, and did as part of his comedy show. And at one point, he went down to a Memphis territory, and if you ever find the videos, he acts exactly like a wrestling heel, just saying stuff to bait the crowd and to make them hate him. And it to me is when it's done right, it's beautiful.
Who is the wrestler that he had like beef with?
Oh, Jerry the King Lawler.
And was that part of kayfabe, or was that was real, right? Because it was kayfabe.
It's kayfabe.
That's kayfabe.
Watch Man in the Moon, where they went for years not admitting that was a.
So there you go. There's prime example. Because even and here's wrestling's fake. You know what?
But he really did slap him really hard on the Letterman show. There's enough there to kind of make you
sell
think.
It, right? And I mean, that's the thing. And I've gained a lot of respect for the whole WWE stuff. I mean, they lay it on the line. They work hard.
Right.
They act. I mean, they put on a show. I defy you to put on a WWE performance and just flip right past.
Right.
It sucks you in immediately.
Yeah.
You're like, well, what's happening? So, people that, I mean, again, never been a big fan just because it never had the opportunity, but man, it's fun.
It's something. And I think, people talk about, maybe there's a bad example, but, Keanu Reeves doesn't really get on a horse and shoot people in the face like he does in John Wick 3. There's special effects. There's stuntmen
spoiler alert.
Yeah, sorry. It's a great trailer if you get a chance to see it.
Oh, okay. That's in the trailer.
Right. In the same way, yes, it's a scripted outcome, but somebody is jumping off, soaring 40 feet through the air, doing a backflip, crashing through something.
That's right.
That's happening.
And you're entertained. And by the way, just to be clear, the spoiler alert part was the horse, not the fact that John Wick shot somebody in the face.
Yeah, that's what you're getting into when you buy that ticket.
That's
there will
been
be
well
face
established.
shots. Yeah.
Point blank face head trauma for sure. Bob.
So do want to end with my favorite use of the term kayfabe. So there's a gentleman by the name of Pat Patterson, who, by the way, was the first WWF Intercontinental Champion after he won a fake tournament. A tournament that never happened, and he was declared that took place in Puerto Rico.
Oh, now you're just...
Sorry, getting back to the kayfabe. But anyway, he would make that... They were somewhere where there was someone that was assisting the wrestlers in the locker room, and every time the guy came in, he would say kayfabe and said it over and over to the point where the guy came in the room and said, by the way, my name's not kayfabe, it's Mark.
That's a good story. So... before we wrap this up, any idea where the term kayfabe came from? Was it just pulled out of thin air? Like, why kayfabe?
I try to find something, the roots of it, and the best I can find is it's kind of like a pig Latin of be fake.
Oh, that makes sense.
But I think it's just like a nonsense term that someone would say in the...
Right. It's not based on like the Latin word for theater.
It's a term that you knew.
Be fake pig Latin makes...
Yeah, and you say that, and no one else knows what it means, and you move on.
All right. Well, speaking of moving on, I think we have hit everything we need to hit. So
if you were a wrestler, what would your gimmick be?
I would straight up just be Dan Rice.
Dan Rice.
That's the whole gimmick.
That would be terrifying.
Yeah.
You would be the I'm trying to think of. I would be like the Weasley manager. That would, like just kind of go around ringside and mess with people.
Yeah.
Or I would just go full-fledged dad character. Like my thing, I would go out there and I would lecture the crowd on, not turning off the lights in their house.
Right.
And, cooling down the neighborhood and, asking them if they had left the car.
Yeah. I can see it now. Dan Rice, I got 2 words for you. Proper tire inflation. I'm sorry, that was 3 words. But I like it.
I like it. But also,
it's still real to me.